So this is in case I get hungry, but the name is Snickers. So the first person that snickers at one of my jokes, well, oh, I can't decide. I'm keeping it for me. Okay. So I did a present. You learn so much in teaching, right? Teaching is one of the great learns. So I was in wait, where was I this weekend? Moscow, Idaho, and they had their state conference, and I got to present a session I'm very passionate about, phrasing, beautiful phrasing. And so I go to point, to the screen, and how many of you know this? If you have what they call a smart screen, it's backlit, so this just disappears, right? You can't see the little red dot because the light cancels it out that's coming through, like your television. You can't really use this on a TV. You can use it up there. We could I could point out things. There's Woody Woodpecker, if you follow. See the two eyes? And there's the beak. That's Woody Woodpecker. And here is the Phantom of the Opera over by the fire escape. What? Oh, yes, this used to be the clock. It was. You laugh. How many of you remember the clock in here? And every like 5 minutes before the hour, it would start going shh, 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 because it was like recalibrating because it was controlled by the physical plant. I promise I won't shine this in anybody's eyes because that could hurt, so I'm not doing that. Anything else you'd like to know? Okay, class dismissed. All right. These are the flowers. Yeah. Oh, a little. See, that's why we have Michelle. Michelle and Terry, they've been great, so applause for them. So. And Barbie, come out, sit. 1831. Oh, no, this one might have been, this was a little bit later. Okay, so now what you're going to listen to first, and this is not original from Greece, thousands of years ago, or a couple thousand years ago, the Aeolian harp. So who would know this? I didn't know till Wikipedia, till the internet days, that Aeolia, and that's probably not proper pronunciation, is the Greek god of wind. So the Aeolian harp was a harp, literally harp, played, and I don't know if the strings, they must have been gut unless they had some kind of pulled wire back then, way back, BC times, 5th century BC maybe. And the wire could have been gut from sheep intestines, wrapped and then pulled, and that Baroque violins will sometimes have gut strings, and they'll be wrapped with wire, like silver perhaps. Okay, so this is an Aeolian harp model, and just listen to it because the wind is actually playing it, so you'll see, and I think we'll find out. And you can type in Aeolian harp, and there's several different sound bites, if you will. So years ago, in fact, Barbie and I were playing the opening piece of, I think maybe my faculty recital or just a wonderful joint recital with all of us together playing different pieces. And we were playing the Mozart duet we played last couple weeks ago for you. And we played actually the whole piece, didn't we? But this was, in fact, it was the whole piece. However, and it wasn't Barbie's bad pedaling, I will tell you, but she was taking charge of sort of like the pedal at the beginning. But what she didn't know is that the tuner had left not something in the piano, but he didn't reattach something that made the pedal eternally on, so we started playing. Kind of like the Aeolian harp, right? It was just wind playing the keys, and the pedal wouldn't disengage. Well, Barbie is so wonderful and intent that she wasn't going to let that stop us. and, and you don't even remember it. No, this is a memory test for Barbie. and it happened that I know how to do things. You know, I tuned a few notes, and I studied that at the conservatory with a Steinway guy from New York and Cleveland and all that. So I said, I think I know what's wrong. I need a screwdriver. So I go off stage, and Stephen Kalm was our chair or our dean at the time, and he told me later, he said, I just want to, I'll have a Bloody Mary. And how about a vodka tonic? And so, but that I did come back with a screwdriver, and I took the piano apart, and that's the only thing anybody commented on the whole night, right? And Barbie apparently forgot it because she was very intent on playing. So I'm going to play for you. I'm going to tell you that playing and teaching is a little bit like you're on this Chevrolet going down I-90, and there comes a Ford, and you think, I'd rather be in the Ford, so you sort of, while the cars are synchronizing, you step into the Ford. And it's sort of like that, stepping between teaching and playing. So if the car stops or whatever, you'll forgive me. But I'm going to play for you Chopin's Aeolian Harp Etude, which is probably named that because it sounds sort of like the wind could play it. Okay, so this will be what you'll hear in a moment, and you can listen to this at home. I'll post these tomorrow. Oh, I hope this, ooh, now we might have a new little issue. So if that doesn't play, well, in fact, you don't have to hear it today, so it's not a problem because I'm going to play it for you. So the Aeolian harp, this is the second set of etudes. Bach wrote 24 preludes and fugues in Book 1, and then another 24 preludes and fugues in Book 2. This is going back to our first day of Bach, and you know this famous prelude. So beautiful. It's so simple and so beautiful. And we talked about how harmony is happening very much in Bach's time. Harmony grew up, you could say. And so Bach knew. And then. And he actually just wrote out those chords after the first couple measures. And you're thinking, what does that have to do with the Aeolian harp? And it does have something to do. And so he would. This is a really ugly harmony, but doesn't it sound beautiful? It's by itself, it's just like that screaming kid in the 4th grade that you're trying to raise and get off to school, and you're having this little discussion and it isn't going so well. But Bach knew how to make, and then, because this ugliness is going to resolve to beauty. So sometimes those little arguments are just realigning mom and kid, you know, kind of, okay, we got that worked out. I'll see you after school. So, look, she looks a little pained up there, doesn't she? Anyway. So then you see he wrote the chords because then this person would know, because that took some engraving and time to write out. But if you knew what to do, then you do that and you do that. So the lead-in is that harmony has a purpose. It's not just because that's all C major in different places on the piano, but it's all C major. And C major is really beautiful if you've at least gone to Greece and Tokyo and you know, you've been somewhere. And then you come back home. So C major is home. And then you say, well, that C major is nice, but that same C could fit with that harmony as well. So it has a common note, right? So then we're departing, but we still have our bungee cord to home if we need it. So, and then this, now the D is the common note for the next harmony, which then every note is not in C major, so everything goes back to C major. It's kind of like that. So harmonies are paramount, and we know that. Melody, harmony, rhythm, all those things. And then form. Form is this wonderful mold that you can pour the notes into and make them organized into the various parts of a piece. So this is the Aeolian harp etude. So beautiful, and the harmonies are so the harmonies themselves, just that's the journey in a way. You know, it's like the scenery. If you're on the Danube and you see this monastery up there and the castle over here and the tree and the beautiful and the flood coming, then you and then you get in the lifeboat and there's all kinds of parts of adventures. But this is a glorious piece of repeated pattern like that, except it's and the pedal, who asked me about the pedal? The guy in the wonderful orange shirt there, I think. We talked about that a little bit. Did it make sense that the pedal releases these notes to sound? So until the pedal came into the piano, and the harpsichord never had a pedal. They had just individual little shut off the strings, dampers they're called. So, but as soon as you got the pedal, and there's your Aeolian harp. The wind keeps the notes all sustained. And so that's a beautiful thing. So now if you can practice it without pedal. Barbie can attest that we pianists, we're always practicing pedal pieces without the pedal to see what we need to do. Because if you're making a mess without the pedal, it'll be even messier with the pedal. So you try to clean everything up as a pianist when you're practicing. Now we have melody and harmony and rhythm, so the rhythms are repetitive, so it's just a continuous motion. And the melody is up here. I mean, what could be simpler than just repeating it, but it's going somewhere. And And just that one little note changing tears at your heartstrings because it's, I mean, we talked about this, I think, last year with Rachmaninoff. How many were in the Rachmaninoff course? Yay, well, thank you for coming back. That's brave, very brave of you. So we talked about it last year. When you have a harmony, and then you play one note that isn't in the harmony, but is neighboring, and then you go up here, but the B flat, I'm playing a B flat. I would show you if I could, if we had that kind of overhead camera. Those are called different things in music theory that the kids are over in room 105 studying as we speak. If you'd rather, you can go over there. You might come back though, because they're already into their 6th or 7th week. And so those upper notes are neighboring notes. In this case, this is an upper neighbor. I remember last year I told you, not an uppity neighbor, and not a kind of a lower class neighbor or whatever. And we shouldn't really discriminate against anybody. And nobody should be uppity, but here we have the upper neighbor. Isn't that beautiful? If it were just... Finally you get a new note because there's a new harmony, but the same harmony. And because I go 5 notes away, that's also they're called non-harmonic tones or notes. And so that note doesn't belong in the harmony, but it's those notes that really get you. You don't even know it when you're listening, but it's just so interesting because it's expanded and it's amplified and it's emotional. And if you wanted to write down the German word for it, this could be your German test. Seufzer is the word. And Seufzer means sighing. Da da da, I'm sighing now. Da da, this makes me crying now. Something like that. And so and then he keeps that is the new note. And it's really the home note. So we went away from home. We just went next door to see if they would donate to the children's fund. And then we came back because they said, well, we already gave at the office. And then they changed, Chopin knew to change the harmony, not the melody. So and that same home note belongs to another harmony, which is here. So the harmonies are shifting, but they're common notes that keep it kind of, or all the notes change to a different harmony. So you're going on a harmonic journey, but you're going on an emotional journey with the music. You feel it in your heart. And this is what we're going to talk about today. Romantic style, with the years being approximately 1800, overlapping with Beethoven, until 1901 was Rachmaninoff's famous concerto. So the 19th century, you could say. But things are always shifting, and we'll talk next week also about how things were going in France. So, and this is the same E flat. You didn't necessarily know that was an E flat, and you're thinking, what's a flat? But it's okay, you don't have to know any of these things. He keeps the E flat and he changes the harmony. And it couldn't be more beautiful, but it's not so different from Bach, but the pedal let us open up the harmonies, so instead of going... And one of the reasons Mozart wrote a lot of these basses is because they weren't using this. They didn't have a pedal I'm sorry I'm confusing you with too much information. Could you keep it simple, stupid? But they had a knee levers, and Mozart could do it that way, but they didn't need to because they were. First of all, he didn't have that many notes, right? Only that many. I had to tune a few of those today. You getting the feel for this a little bit? You don't have to know all this, but just appreciate that the composer knew it. And hopefully we pianists know it too. Jeffrey Beagle said it so beautifully. He said the composer created the work and we recreate. It's an opportunity. We recreate the work because usually the composers are no longer living. It's hard to play when you're not, except by recording, and that's 19th and 20th century, right? So here we are. So could you feel the wind sometimes increasing and decreasing and blowing and breezing and flowing? I mean, air flows, right? My brother's an aerodynamic engineer, is it right? We think of this invisible stuff called air. We wouldn't get very far without it, would we? I think oxygen is included for free. So So thank you. That's just such a great piece. And it's the first of the second set of 12. So I was saying Bach wrote 12 major key preludes and fugues in the first book and 12 minor key. So C major and C minor, C sharp major, C sharp minor. C sharp is the black key right next to the middle C. And then D major and D minor and E flat, etc. And he wrote one in every key, and he was sort of showing that you could use all of the keys of the harpsichord and make a new piece out of every key. And somebody asked our keys, why do we do D flat major instead of D major? And we were talking about it last week, and Marjorie played for you the beautiful So we're into the romantic time, and the pedal for the piano was huge. It was just part of it. Imagine that same piece without the pedal. So the pedal opened up the world of sound, and it allowed, and otherwise he would have had to do something like the Alberti bass to keep the sound going, because that didn't work in Mozart's time, and it started to work in Beethoven's time. So then this pretty music, right? But it wasn't possible until the pedal could do that. And so romance opened up, and romantic times and romantic literature and romantic architecture, if you will. I don't know enough about that. But romantic art. All of this was subjective, is the word. Mozart is a little more objective. And that's a famous sonata. It's called the Easy Sonata, but I don't recommend it for most 5-year-olds. Not Barbie might have done it. I waited till I was 6. Anyway, it's called an easy sonata, but the idea is a different mold, different instrument, but the different world required the different instrument. We were talking a little bit. Beethoven wasn't happy having only those notes because he wanted to use that note, but it didn't exist yet. And by the time it came to his end of life, he had this to this. He had this, that's 6 octaves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 octaves. An octave is all the notes between C and C. From C to shining C, you have an octave, but you can also have an octave from D to shining D. So it's just the same note, an octave higher or an octave lower. Octave just means 8. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's all it means. So you could say Oktave, 8. We have the word 8. They have the word acht in German, octave, kind of. Okay. So this is a little bit of romance, and we're going to move soon to Barbie. She's going to play for us a beautiful piece by Mendelssohn. And I don't need my sound today, but I did want to go a little bit to review, and you can review these at home. Am I still on here? Can you hear me? Is this working okay? Raise your hand if you can't hear me. That's sort of an ironic question, isn't it? Raise your hand if you can't hear me. Okay. Oh, by the way, how many of you, without calling too much attention, how many of you know our dear friend who is a member of this class, Sue Talbot? Anybody? Many of you do. Sue Talbot. Okay. Well, raise your hand if you're not Sue Talbot, and then we'll figure out who it is. Because you're going to sing Happy Birthday, Dear Sue. Okay. And I'm going to use the pedal, and there's only 3 harmonies that are used, but they're really great harmonies, and the melody's sweet. Here we go. Oh, there's roses back here. Oh. Oh, you run them down, but I have to show. So these, can you believe these haven't frozen yet? So Gary said, would Sue like some roses for her birthday? And I said, well, I think so. So we want the vase back, though. You can keep the roses. So congratulations to Sue. Does anybody else have a birthday today? It has to be today. We're out of roses, but you can take home some dahlias maybe. Okay, you'll gather. Yeah, sure. She's sharing. This is Sue. She's always sharing. All righty. So that was fun. So here we are. Take a look up here. I can point as I find my pointer. Maybe I set things down and didn't, oh, here it is, hiding. So this does work, the pointer. So you'll review this, and you'll say, I don't really know what that means, and that's totally fine. You don't have to. But if no silence, continuous motion. We talked about the doctrine of affections, right? Would you rub elbows with a neighbor next to you, and now you've been affectionate? and so that's a little bit. But emotions are affections. And now we've been talking and playing and thinking about classical music together. The pedal is coming into use. Experiments. Haydn really experimented with the pedal. It was a new invention, kind of. Mozart used it sparingly, and Beethoven used it more and more. This is the harmonies we're talking about. And you don't just always stay in the home key. You move along, and you get different keys, major and minor, but not D minor, maybe E minor, maybe F minor, maybe G major right next to it. And all kinds of things, because music is evolving like life evolves, like culture evolves, like people mature and evolve. And so you can read these things at home. Extra musical means, like you've heard of the Moonlight Sonata, right? Beethoven didn't call it the Moonlight Sonata, but it was a good idea because and this was where Beethoven used the pedal, right, in this piece, because it would be too dry, so pedal warms everything up. So extra musical means just beyond the music, something else. And so there are stories, and Barbara will tell. Next week she's going to play a couple of pieces. One is Forest Murmurs, and the other one is the, Dance of the Gnomes by Franz Liszt. And we'll kind of go through a little bit of this. Whoops. And then, here we are. So then we're into the third column, and now we're into the romantic world, and I will give you some pages you can read. I don't know, it's a lot of work to get over to the library. The hard copy, it's out of print, the book that I liked for Keyboard Lit. This is an unusual thing. The author's still living, but the book is out of print. Usually it's the other way around. The author is no longer with us, but the book is reprinted. So anyway, it's in the library for you if you wish, and I'll give you that. Now, this is a big thing in romantic time. Yearning. It was just like, kind of, they celebrated the human condition. And if everything were attainable, you wouldn't have to yearn, right? It would be, I can't quite get that. So you aspire in a way. So you yearn. And so the yearning is expressed in music, and you'll hear it when Barbie plays this. And it's a beautiful piece by Mendelssohn, and it has yearning right away in the very opening. And you'll hear, and this was this is, if you didn't mean to play that note, it could be a sour note. But in this case, it's the correct note, but it sounds wrong because it's headed to that note, and that's the note of resolution. This is the note of dissonance or tension. And life has tension and resolution, repeatedly cycling, tension, resolution. So I'll tell you the notes that belong or don't belong. This note is wrong, and this is the right note. These are all okay, everything's good until here. That note sounds so beautiful, but it's not correct. It's headed to this note. It's the uppity neighbor. And here's wrong, correct, really wrong. So these notes are tugging at your heart while you're listening to great music, because it's very known, it's very calculated, it's also very artsy, very not inevitable, but very not even predictable, just very logical in a way. It would just be, if I played only the correct notes that belong to the harmony, it would sound like this. And that's, popular music today is very sophisticated, but there was a time in rock and roll where it would only be popular for a week or so because it didn't have any depth to it, because it was sort of always the right notes, if I can say it that way. But here, okay, this is too simplified. These are all correct. It's really beautiful, but the wrong notes or the dissonant notes that need to be resolved add depth and beauty. And here, so I want you to go, oh, every time I play a wrong note, go, oh. And Seufzer, I told you could, that's a German word. Seufzer is German for sighing. I think I said it. If I didn't, that's why I mentioned. So in German they say, Seufzer, 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 Seufzer. So the sir is the right note, and the Seuf is the sigh. So you could go, sighing, 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 sighing. Does that make sense a little bit? And you feel it. And it's just the most glorious thing. So that is how yearning can be expressed in music, by taking the notes that don't quite fit. You know, sometimes we feel like we don't quite fit, right? And then you get it fixed with your friend, and you get everything back together and resolved. So that's life. I don't know where I put my little doodad here. So that's just a few things, and you're going to look at these on your own. This is very important, because in the time of Haydn and Mozart, and then increasingly disobedient Beethoven, form was where they started, and they wrote things that fit into the mold. And then gradually they'd say, well, what if I stretch the mold a little bit? And what if I do it this way instead? And so it couldn't stay that way forever. Nothing ever does. And so in the classical time, as an overall view or overall point, we say the form dictates or guides or determines the content. But in the Romantic time, the content became the important thing, and the form could be anything. And this was even in literature, and maybe you can tell about Romantic literature. They could have the most disconnected episodes all kind of flowing, but the writer was feeling this need to change it up somehow. And I'm not an expert at that, and so we'll consult with you. But in the third, fourth row there, that's our consultant. So now silence is becoming important. The pedal's becoming very important. The dissonant, and I'm telling you about dissonance resolving. and the consonant harmonies. Consonant is the right note. Dissonants are the sighing notes, the notes that tug at our heartstrings. And chromatic is just a word for every note of the scale, or every note on the instrument. If you're using chromatic, then no particular note is more important than another, so they're all kind of equal, and chromatic it's a word for color, right? Monochromatic means black and white photographs. Monochromatic, one color, black or white. And then we are going to be moving into character pieces, and Marjorie's going to come in short order here and play for us as well. I'm keeping track of time a little bit. Yeah, good. So Barbie will play just momentarily. She's so patient. and that's great. We're going to hear a Mendelssohn variation set. She'll tell you about it. And then here we have these associations. So Liszt would write a piece about the gnomes, the dance of the gnomes. Yes, let's get to it. Yeah, as soon as you get a microphone.
Do I have to turn it on?
Yeah, it's on. Just hold it close.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I like what Steve was telling you about when you have two close notes together, you have a dissonance and then a resolution. And he gave a few examples. I need the music stand.
Oh, yes.
Can you turn for me?
Yes.
Okay. So, for instance, the first two melody notes of the Mendelssohn piece I'm going to play are. Then, so he's exploring two notes side by side, and if you play them together, it's a discord. It's an interval of two notes side by side that, when played together, make a discord. It's not a harmony like that would be. It's a sort of, it makes you cringe. And same with this. And same with this. But the way Mendelssohn presents it is he resolves it. He makes a dissonance and he resolves it. You'll hear the harmony. But I want to forward now to 20 years after. The Mendelssohn was composed in 1842, which is about 10 years after the Chopin etude that Steve just played for you. That was the 1830. Well, in 1842, Mendelssohn composed this theme and variations, exploring the use of two notes side by side when played together. They make you cringe, kind of, but he doesn't ever do that because he always resolves it. Well, if you fast forward to the 1860s, Liszt experiments also with two notes side by side. And he goes like this. He makes grace notes out of them. So the melody really is. It's really interesting. And then you fast forward to 1908, and we have an impressionistic composer who uses two notes side by side. Maurice Ravel was an impressionistic composer. He uses A, G sharp. It's sort of supposed to mimic water, like the water. How would you explain that kind of water that's sort of rippling water? And then you fast forward 40 more years in the 1940s, and the American Composers Association commissioned Samuel Barber to write a piece for piano in honor of the American Composers Association's 50th anniversary. So he wrote a melody that's nothing but dissonance. I mean, it does have harmony in the bass, but I'll play you the melody. It really is. It focuses on these two notes. Or you can have a ninth if you spread them out, or a second like that. And those, when played together. And it's very, very aggressive and loud. But he mixes it with the harmony. So you can hear how with the modern contemporary music, composers were incorporating the dissonance as part of a main melody component. So it's very interesting to see how harmony progressed from the 1800s to the 19th century. So, I mean, from the 19th to the 20th and 21st century. So now I will play the Mendelssohn Variation Serieuses. Also interesting is that Chopin, Mendelssohn, and Liszt were all born within a year of each other, between 1810 and 1811. They were all the same age. And so, yeah, they knew each other. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so here is the Mendelssohn Variation Serieuses. And listen to... Those are the notes of the melody in every variation, so you can see how differently he treated it. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
So this Variation Serious sounds like a beautiful title, but it just means serious variations. And this is what you can listen to at home. So I'll post that tomorrow on the internet or on the share file, and you can just enjoy hearing it and seeing it. For those of you that read music, you can see it. For those of you that don't read music, you can look at it like a graph and just kind of see the ups and downs. It's fine. That's what it is. It's just a graph. So here is Barbie playing this beautiful piece, beautifully. I will turn for you. We won't use a screwdriver, though, or a Bloody Mary.
of weeks, we only have 2 more weeks, we're going to go up to the Impressionists and we're going to go up to the Contemporaries, and it's going to be probably some Rachmaninoff in there somewhere, Steve.
Yes, and then we're all going to climb up to the M. So it's something I didn't say, but it's filled with his music. We both got to play these pieces, some of them, at, probably about the same time when we were kids, and we were aspiring musicians. When I learned this piece myself, I was still in high school and got to play it in my senior high school recital as a high school senior. And I just could pour my heart into it. I didn't know some of these things I'm telling you about, but it just woke me up every day. I mean, this morning I thought, I wonder how many people are thinking, well, maybe I'll sleep in today instead of going to class. I don't have that option for this course. But I did think about it maybe. But, so the idea of dissonance, so we lean on those notes, that we savor them almost. It's not like we're looking for trouble in life, but maybe it's because it feels so good if you're sort of struggling and you finally math problem and you figure out, oh, But this is, the harmony has moved on, but the melody is still waiting to move on. Does that make sense? And that's called a suspension. You suspend the resolution. You wait. You make us wait. He didn't go. Because those notes, this note belongs to D minor, but it doesn't belong to what's called an E major seventh. So that's more terminology than you want, but so you wait to resolve, and then so those beautiful dissonances and suspensions and uppity neighbors, and this is called the appoggiatura, where I told you so if you go to the so-called wrong note by going not just to the next door neighbor, but to a few notes away, a few houses down the street, so you go, so I'm going to lean on that note, I'm going to play it a little louder, and then the resolution. You still want the melody note to be louder than the accompaniment note. So we pianists especially, let's just say we're privileged to try and figure it out. Because you have to manage every note, right? You get 10 of them at a time if you have 10 fingers, and sometimes, and each one of them is something's more important than something else. So this, you don't want to drown out the soloist if you're an accompanist, right? So when we are soloists as pianists, we are both soloist and accompanist. So you find that relationship. And then you lean on that note and less on that. And that's called an appoggiatura. Could you all say it after me? Appoggiatura. It sounds like a town in Italy. It probably is. Appoggiatura. So you don't have to say it, but you can think it. And you can hear it. So I think Marjorie's here. And this is a good thing because it's her turn. So I told her 10:10. So she's a couple minutes early. No, yeah, we need you always, not just now. So here's Marjorie. And so most of you know when I retired from the U, now this is my 4th year, I'm so glad I get to keep teaching. It's really fun. But you graduate sort of to retirement, right? And you don't know what's coming ahead because you've never done it before. And so, but when you retire from university and you don't have a whole bunch of little high school kids and grade school kids you're teaching, all your students go to your wonderful successor.
Oh.
And to our wonderful collaborative pianists, and they all play with Barbie. There's a concert coming up, or a concerto competition. Yeah, right, and everybody's invited to that. I'll tell you about it next week. Our last class, a few days later, you can hear college kids and high school kids playing beautiful solos, and just come and enjoy it. It's
Also put November 1st on your calendar, 7:30 p.m. here in the
Yes.
hall. Jeffrey Shumway,
Yes.
piano solo recital.
Yes,
Fabulous.
He taught at BYU forever, and forever eventually comes to an end, and then you retire. But he taught there until his retirement, and then because he was married to a gal from Corvallis, or from Darby actually, and they moved to Montana. So Jeffrey, wonderful pianist, is our friend and neighbor, and not uppity though, just not either down. He's up the Bitterroot, down south, all at the same time. Okay, so this is Marjorie. She's going to tell you about her piece.
Right. Steve asked me to play The Maiden and the Nightingale by Enrique Granados, Spanish composer. And The Maiden and the Nightingale is actually from his large-scale suite titled Guayescas, inspired by the paintings of Goya. And so there's you hear just lots of, just the scent of Spanish rhythms and Spanish melodies. He actually worked the pieces from Guayescas into an opera. And the world premiere, y'all, was in New York in 1916, not in Europe. Why? What was going on in 1916, right? The war. And had Granados not come to the States to supervise the production, he would have had more years to live. What happened is he was, after he performed for President Wilson at the White House, he embarked on the SS Sussex, which was torpedoed in the English Channel. But a survivor says that actually Granados was safe on a lifeboat, but when he saw his wife struggling, he jumped in to try to save her, and they both went down. So tragic. Somebody said it was like due to the weight of his money belt. That sort of just took him down. I don't know. But anyway, it's so tragic. So this piece is kind of fitting. It's kind of sorrowful. But it starts off, so The Maiden and the Nightingale, it starts off with the plaintive melody of the maiden. And then at the end, listen out for the wispy arabesque and trills of the singing nightingale.
And I think we'll have a little bit of time after this that we can, if you have thoughts, questions for Barbie, questions for me, questions of Marjorie, we can, hopefully, if Marjorie, if you can stay a few minutes, we can interact a little bit. So just think of things. All along, though, you're noticing this romantic feel, this romantic, not just flair, but the ability of the composer to write whatever came from his or her heart at that moment.
piano last time. My husband would not have been pleased.
Keep that. So, yeah, just, we have a little bit of time, so just thoughts maybe of anything, whatever you've learned so far, or whatever you're wanting to know. What? We might need to put the microphone. Can you?
I'm a beginning player, so I'm completely overwhelmed by this. I'm curious why there were two bass clefs. Why there were 2 lines of bass clef?
Two
In this
lines of bass
music?
clef.
Did that all work, I think?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. Oh. I know. We need another mic.
It's the recording. So if we don't talk into the microphone, the recording doesn't get it.
This, you'll hear Michelle's sexy voice now on the recording. Is it,
Yes. Well, there's it's such registers from the keyboard are being used while you still need to have this melodic line going sort of in the middle register. So he spreads it out within 3, different staves, staffs.
It's
And so-
layers.
yeah.
Just like a whole orchestra of notes.
Believe you me, it's a little tricky to read. Not for Barbie, but for me.
Oh, come on. Well, yeah, good question.
Yeah. It's easier to memorize something like that than to play with music.
It's easier to make sense of it, too, if you can see it sort of not all cluttered together. Yeah. You'll enjoy that in your next week's lesson. Yeah, thank you for that question. What else? Yes, Royce. Yeah, okay.
When did this classification system develop? I mean, Baroque, classical, romantic. Who's responsible for making those definitions, and when did that happen?
This is a really good question. You should look that up and come back and report.
Because it's different with different sources have different dates, and it's kind of nebulous, actually.
But
you have
there's-
transitional periods too.
Yeah, and we've been talking about literature and architecture and art and dance. It's all not just all cultural, but it's cross-cultural. So maybe the name applies mostly to the architecture of the Baroque period rather than the music, but the music of the time coincided with the architecture, something like that. And then literature in Romantic, the authors were writing free spirit kind of form in their literature before music was evolving into something similar where the composer just, I'll write what I feel. I'll let my feelings take me to the next. Schumann was, when we're not actually doing Schumann, that I know of, we could end up with a little bit next week or the following week, but he was the archetypical romantic pianist who was he was going to study literature and law. And so he was a reader, and he loved the romantic authors. And so there were romantic authors before, or coinciding, or overlapping, or integrating with romantic music. Does that make some sense? Then you can finish the report. But it's a great question.
And I guess you probably talked about how, like composers in the Baroque period composed for a need or specific need. If they worked in the courts or in the churches, they had to write whatever was requested of them.
It's true.
And then in the classical period, you start to see that with Mozart and Beethoven. They want to break away and become their own sort of individual.
There's so many things and so many related topics that we could, I took one semester of Beethoven in graduate school, right? So we're just spending a day thinking about Beethoven. But they were under a system of patronage in Bach's time and through Haydn and Mozart. Mozart never got a really good job. He just kind of made it hand to mouth. Schubert was kind of, they say, a bohemian. He didn't ever have money, and he never had a piano, but he was immensely talented. And so he said, I was born for no other reason on this earth except to compose. And that was his life. to pour it out. If he got some food and he got a place to sleep, I mean, he had an apartment, but I told you the other day, and you know, I think you'll remember everything I ever said, but I don't remember everything I ever said. Why should you? And so he lived in this apartment with 2 other friends, and whoever had money that month paid the rent, right? Kind of bohemian lifestyle. It wasn't like he needed a job, and maybe he got a little pittance, or he was supported by some important people who knew his talent, and they just made sure he had enough to get by. Things. What else? How are we doing on time? I'm not watching.
Thank you for your explanation of the right and the wrong note. That helped. But would you go back and talk about this key thing? Because I hear musicians say, oh, it's in the key of X, but everybody else seems to play what they want. So I got to understand this overarching concept. It might unlock music for me.
Yeah, okay. We can all add to that. But when music is in a key, it has a home harmony that it's going to start out maybe with that harmony and end with that harmony. And in between it can go where it needs to. But this time of what you'll look on your sheets at home, and it'll say functional harmony. It means that the chords have a purpose. This chord will normally go to that one, and that one will take you back home, something like that. And so there are harmonies within every key, but if you have C major, the most common probably, because it's all the white keys, form, and that's a C major scale. Using all the notes of the scale, you can have a harmony built on every white key. If I could show you. Does that make a little bit of sense? And then sometimes you might go to a different, use some black keys, and so those become excursions of sorts. Am I getting into the direction at all of what you? Yeah. So there's, and we could go, if everybody, so do, re, mi is the key, the notes of that key, of that harmony, of the scale, you could say. And then the chords get built on the notes from the scale. So if I'm in D flat major, I will use some black keys, because D flat is a, if I could show you up there, with a black key. Actually, I have a way, when we were all teaching in COVID, I had an overhead camera for, because I was home and the kids were here in my studio, and we couldn't be in the same room, right, because of COVID. And so we devised ways of showing everything so they could see the keyboard from this angle and from that angle. It's like, maybe if we had a drone in this room, we could do it. And kind of zip. But this is the key of Marjorie played last week, right? And it's a combination of all the notes that are in that key and a few that aren't, for spice and diciness and loveliness. And maybe that isn't even enough, but I think, just look up in Wikipedia too. I mean, just Google and you'll learn each little thing, and then there's a link to that one, and then you come back. And is that a little bit what you're wondering about? Yeah. So D flat major, we talked about it last week, and Margie's I can feel add something about. So today we're talking about the leaning into the sort of the wrong notes, that they're still in the scale, but they're just not in the chord. So it's a lot of information. But if you have even a gist, you can appreciate, and the same piece could have been done and you would enjoy that too, but maybe after you've had a few years of maybe this class or other classes or lessons or just listening, I decided, for me, that's sort of darker and dusky and sexy and purple, lavender maybe. And this is green or yellow or but maybe that's caramel and the other one is vanilla or something. But there are flavors and keys as well. So otherwise everybody just plays C major. So there's interest in all these different, sometimes it has to do with the vocal range too. We have time? Oh yes, Marjorie.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like D major is supposed to be very, if you're in the key of D major, it's very joyful and happy, you know. It's a wonderful key, and B major is beautiful. But then within is, you saw this score, you saw a bunch of accidentals, you know, sharps and double flats, double sharps, whatever, if you read music. Anyway, a lot of dissonance, which adds, as you were saying, spice and
depth
and interest, frankly. So it just keeps it interesting. You have some tension, then you have the release, and then builds up again.
And the only reason Barbie isn't adding to this conversation is that she doesn't have a microphone. So, yes, please.
In China, if you speak the Chinese language and you say the same word up here, and then you say it down here, up here, they mean different things. So the key that you say the word on, the meaning of the word is determined by the pitch of the key that you're saying it on, not by the actual word itself. So if you say music, music, those are different meanings because they're on different pitches. So it's very interesting that we say perfect pitch means you can identify the name of a note just by hearing it. Well, in the Chinese culture, they almost all can do it because they learn from the time they're babies that different pitches or different keys have different meanings for the same word. So I think that's fascinating that, you know, the key or the tone of the word you say can affect the meaning of it very greatly. That's all I have to say.
We're at 10:30, and I know it's time, but at the very end, I want to say, apropos that when I was a kid, and a Chinese Christian came to our church to kind of explain how she came to Christianity, and she said it was actually pretty silly because the Caucasian person that was inviting people to the Christian faith kept saying you should follow Christ, but the word for Christ and the word for pig depends on how you pronounce it, and so you should come and follow the pig, and everybody knew what she meant, but anyway, it does matter. Intonation. Okay, guys, we're gonna wrap up.
Thank you so much, Stephen, Marjorie, Barbie. We'll see you all next week.